I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. I'm Lynda Norman. I'm a watercolor artist in the beautiful province of British Columbia. Today, I'm going to get back to vignettes. It's been a while since I've done one, so thanks for being here. Vignettes. They're always on my mind. I love the loose, flowy nature of them. I love how my Daniel Smith paints work with the water just to create those beautiful mixes and textures. And I think I mentioned in a previous video, I treated myself to some beautiful Arches 300-pound paper. It's been a minute since I painted on my beautiful Arches paper. This is on a block. It is 10 by 14 inches. It is not super rough. It's going to be, I think, very, very conducive to a vignette. So I will start by, hang on a second here. There we go. I was thinking about, I can always take this to Roger at Art Framer and get him to custom cut a mat, but I thought I might just take a moment to just sort of assess where the edges might be. Because it's a vignette, I don't have to be too concerned about all of that, but I just thought if I just give myself a little indication, I don't even have to tape it down because of the paper being on a block. I don't have to worry about that. And the only reason to tape it would be to leave a bit of a white border, but I don't think I really need to do that. But I will indicate the corners just so I have a bit of a visual. And again, just a light pencil mark that I can erase later on. And it'll just give me a bit of a guideline. Sometimes I tend to get a little carried away with some of that. 300-pound Arches. I'm so excited. 140-pound is typically what we paint on, of course. The 300-pound is much more substantial. And being on a block, it's even better. But typically, if you're painting on a 300-pound, 100% watercolor paper, you probably don't even have to tape it down to a board if you don't have the things to do that with. So I'm going to be using my Daniel Smith paints. As always, these are my tried and true. And I might even dip into the Daniel Smith Lunar series for a part of the vignette. I have an idea where I was thinking maybe I would do a little bit of the plastic wrap in the bottom part as it sort of flows down the page. And I thought, what if I dabbed in a little bit of one of the Lunar series, the really heavily granulating paints. So I'm just going to get them all wet because at this point I'm not sure which of those colors I'm going to want to use, but they will be juicy and ready to go when I'm ready. One of the things, and I've mentioned this often, that I notice, especially teaching classes in person, and I get to see how people are interpreting how I'm sharing the information with them. And one of the things I find is that most people tend to use less water than is probably required. And so more water. More water is always the answer as far as I can see for most things. For some of the work, I have my beautiful Levinson large goat hair brush. It has a substantial amount of bristle. Beautiful, beautiful, soft. This is plain solid goat hair. And then I will use my trusty Levinson Goat Synthetic Blend. This is my little workhorse. It's got such a beautiful fine point, but the load that it carries with pigment allows me to create these vignettes by dropping beautiful, rich, thick pigment into the water drops. And that's the secret is getting that pigment rich enough so that when it hits the water drops, it's going to do a little bit of magic on the page. And I don't have my regular spray bottle that I normally use here. I had it out with me when I was doing a workshop the other day. So I'm just going to test this one. I'm going to shoot the camera up above there. Okay. What I want to achieve here with my water droplets is kind of a spatter on the page, irregular droplets, but sizable droplets. if I was to use my continuous mist sprayer, it's going to give me an overall wet, and then the paint and the pigment, when I apply it, is just going to follow as much of that water as it can. The idea here is to get those droplets and keep them a bit separated so that when I drop the paint in, if I want to spread them out, I can do that with the tip of my brush. But quite often they will, if the droplets are large enough, the paint will sort of mingle around in the water and spread out a bit anyway. And a lot of Daniel Smith paints are granulating. I think my Mayan Dark Blue has a bit of granulation, Undersea Green, of course. And so there's some really interesting effects. So I'm going to tip my bottle up this way. Oops, hang on a second. I just want spurtles. Spurtles, that's a word that we use often in my workshops. And I wish you could see these. You know what I should do one day is do one with a slightly colored water. That would be a good idea, eh? Maybe just some blue. But I want a fair bit. It's spring here. It's cool in my workshop, but you know, things tend to dry a little bit quickly sometimes, and so I want to make sure that there's enough water on there so that I can continue to add pigment as I need to shape my trees. So I think I've got a fairly good amount on there. If you sit back, you know, let the light shine, you can sort of see where you're at. I have lots of spatter all over my table here, but that's good. I'm just going to let it sit for a moment, let those droplets decide where they're going to sit. Now I've got a heavier concentration kind of here and a little bit here and some up here. So those will be probably my main trees. And quite often in the past I've suggested that you use, you know, a shape of a letter or a number. And I often just do the L because I like the off-centered focus on one side, especially with the vignette, because then it kind of can flow off the page. But I think I just want to have a couple heavier drops there. That's probably what I need. I mean, I've even done these where I've taken a larger brush and just spattered the water down like that, and that works too, as long as you've got your droplets on the page. All right, so I think they've sat long enough that I can start getting in there now with my paints. And again, when I say water, I mean lots of water. You can see that it's pooling. It's in my paint wells, quite rich and thick, but there's a little bit of pooling on the top, and that's what I want to dip my brush into, so that I can pick up paint that's fairly rich consistency. If you were mixing it in your palette here, you might want to think about, I think they call it tea, milk, and cream. So those are the consistencies, if you can visualize that. And I like to work more in the cream base area. And when my paints are nice and wet and juicy, I really only have to just touch it once into my paint without digging around. You can see there's a little blob on the end there. And now I'm going to start by just adding some of that to some of these water droplets on the page. One more dab. Oh, that's too much. I don't want it dropping off the tip of the brush. And let's just touch the tip of the brush into these water droplets. Shaping a tree, I try to keep the branch parts uneven on the sides. I don't want them to be side by side all the way down. And we'll just go down until we get to the bottom. This is about 2/3 of the way down, I think. And that's, again, keeping the rule of thirds in mind. This is the perfect brush for me for doing this, because it can act as a drawing tool. It can drop the paint in as needed, make things a little bit uneven. Okay, so this Mayan Dark Blue will dry a bit lighter, so it's going to look a little gray, shadowy in the background. So it's my favorite color for doing background trees, mountains, and that kind of thing. And so it just lightly, in the form of a very loose tree shape, getting a couple of these down. I also try to keep the tops of my trees a little bit uneven. You don't want them like somebody's given them a haircut, like the lawnmower's been through. And I like to keep sort of a gap between, and that would be off center as well, just so that the eye doesn't feel that it's too heavy a flow there. And so this side, I think I'm going to try this one just a little bit taller. These guys might end up being a little bit further back. We shall see. I love painting this way. The droplets are not predetermined. They're just there where they landed, and I do love that that process of just allowing things to emerge as they will. So I think I'm going to leave that sort of up there for now. I don't want to bring it down too much further. You can see probably where the paint is sort of filling up these water droplets a little bit. I can go in and sort of encourage them out a tiny bit if I like. The next color that I love to use in there is the undersea green. And again, it's thick and juicy and ready to go. And I don't mind if that green, when I touch it into some of these blue parts, they become, another color altogether as well. And so they can be really beautiful when you allow that to happen. And we'll put some there's a little droplet of paint there. I'm going to turn that into a tree. People say you can't fix mistakes, and I don't really call them mistakes. Things happen, and this is why we have, birds and trees and things that we can paint into our paintings. If we're painting loose and intuitive, go with the flow, as they say. And this guy has sort of a empty spot on the side there, so I'm just going to add another little bit of tree shape in there, possibly. And we'll just bring in, I think, a tiny bit of green just to fill in a bit of the background here. And let's let these colors just kind of mingle and play. We don't want to add more water. That's why I was very, careful about making sure I had enough droplets on the page to begin with. If I was to add another spray now, it would affect where these tree shapes are sitting, and things would kind of merge and blend out on all over the page. So try not to, get into a position where you run out of moisture and water that quickly. You can see where the advantage is to having a brush that has a beautiful, flexible tip on it. A lot of watercolor brushes are made to hold a lot of water, but they don't have necessarily the ability for you to be so precise and be able to direct them the same. Now, if you see here where there's a bit of, it's green, but it's quite light. The pigment isn't quite as thick there. If I was to go in and load my brush with some thick pigment and just drop it in, just here and there, it'll be dark and light, so in different places, so you can see that it starts to become shadowy and quite beautiful. And we have one blue tree on this side. I think we'll just put a little green tree beside it. And I love that this branch sort of went up and out. I like to keep my branches a little more straight and downward. Some people like their trees to have the branches swooping up. They're your trees, so however you want to shape them is how they need to be. But this one reminds me of just sort of maybe another another portion of another tree. So I'm just going to create another tree right there. There, I think I like that. And I'm going to wash my brush. The other color that I love to add in is my quinacridone gold. One touch into my wet palette is all I need. This brush soaks up a lot. Most watercolor brushes are made to, to pick up a lot of moisture and pigment, so you should be good there. Now with the quinacridone gold, it's very bright and it's very bossy. It's going to take over wherever I put it. So I'm going to think about where I think I want these highlights and where it might be beneficial. And in here where it's kind of dark, it might be a good place to try to introduce it. And these colors love to play together. And I don't want it to look polka dotty, so I'm going to be a little more careful about where I place my next bit of color. And I don't want it to be patterned, so I'm going to try to again keep it uneven from that little guy there. So I'm going to just introduce it to this wetter spot in the center here. And down here, I think this is probably going to become underbrush at some level. So I'm just going to scuffle a little bit with the side of my brush, just with what's left on my brush after creating these little tree shapes. And I think we'll put one golden tree just over here, just peeking out maybe from behind there a little bit. When you're doing highlights, you don't need a lot of them. You can keep them fairly separate. We can also go back in, and this is something I really love to do sometimes too, is with some quinacridone rose, because it's part of my palette, one of my favorite colors. And if I introduce that just very lightly to some of these areas, just giving it a bit of encouragement to join with what's there on the page. And one little side bit here, I think, is all we would need. Those will continue to work on the page. Actually, if I give it a bit more water, this is just plain water that I'm adding now. And if I tip my page just slightly, it will start to run down. Now I've got some droplets down on the bottom, and this is where the beautiful vignette part does really start to come in. And I think just with clean water, I'm just going to add a few more because I really want this bottom part to run. And if I'm going to go in with my lunar colors, I do need to have a fair bit of water on the page. So I'm just randomly adding a few drops here and there. And I think, let me just test this out. That is the lunar blue. I'm wondering if that is going to work. I might leave that for a bit. I'm going to go back to my Mayan dark blue, load up with some really heavy cream consistency, and I want to introduce it to the bottom part of this. I can even touch a bit into what's already there, and then try to encourage it to come down the page a little bit. Fairly thick, as I mentioned. Really cream consistency, heavy cream. So if you're pouring whipping cream out of a container to whip it up for your dessert, that's kind of, I think, where you're going to want to be at with this. because we've got some green up in the tree area, I'm just going to introduce a tiny bit of the undersea green to these droplets. We'll tip our page in a moment and let them run a little bit further down the page. This one's already wanting to run down. I wonder if I'm just going to set this, it might be a bit much, but I'm just going to set that roll of tape underneath the edge of my paper. And we'll see where that takes us. So just a tiny bit more green. I want this pigment in this area here, underneath these trees in particular, and in here and on this side. I can already see where there's some really beautiful colors blending together and taking form there. I have another idea that I want to add some plastic wrap into this, and we'll see where that takes us. And we will do that. Right now. There's a lot of water on this page. I think before I put the plastic wrap on, I'm just going to touch the corner of my paper towel and use it as a wick to just soak up a little bit of these droplets. I will give it one tip, and then the rest will be able to, we'll lift that off, I think. Just adding the lightest touch. Like I said, it's like a wick. And we'll quickly do this. We won't leave this on very long in this area. But what this will do, will give us that kind of fractured look that will make it kind of, I'm hoping, make it look like there's a little bit of rock and granulation, and just have a bunch of things happening here. I think in another video I will use the granulating paints and the plastic wrap and see sort of where that takes us. I'm still exploring with the granulating paints. They're like magic, and I learn something from them every day. So that might just be our next go with it. And I'm not going to extend this down into all of those drips, I don't think. I just want this effect to be under the trees. Now, often when I'm doing a plastic wrap on paint, I will let it sit overnight, let it dry, and then work on top of it. But I think today I'm going to just let that sit for a moment and take a look at my trees in the vignette up here. See if there's any encouraging that still needs to be done. There are still some beautiful drops there. I think the Mayan dark blue has faded out considerably, so I'm going to go back in with some more thick, rich Mayan blue on my brush. And I just want to add a tiny bit, just randomly here and there, just to enhance just some darker areas on some of these trees. As you know, watercolor dries lighter than when you put it on, so kind of like to go back in sometimes over the top, and just, I'm not going to touch every tree with it. I just want to encourage just a tiny bit of darker color here and there. And again, this will dry a little lighter as well. I never really worry much about, shadows and perspective and all of that, as you probably know if you've been watching me. But I do often like to sort of incorporate a bit of darker color in the underside and in the landscapes that I do, just because it does help, for me anyway, give the illusion of shadow. And we'll just introduce a tiny bit in here maybe. And see how we're doing on this side. Yeah, it's picking up. The paint is dispersing quite nicely. I will give it just a tiny bit more pigment in there, just to give us some rich tones. You can continue to elongate your rooty things if you want to, just with a clean brush with a bit of water on it. And as I said, you could use this as a tool, like almost like a drawing tool, right? And you can encourage these little lines to go where you want them to go. Typically with a landscape, I try to keep things on the horizontal, except for when it's a vignette, because I do like that sort of drawing down of the colors. All right. So the plastic wrap has done some amazing things here. And it's given me some dark and some light. It's kind of pushed things around a tiny bit. And I just absolutely love that. You can see where the quinacridone rose has blended in with the blues and the golds, and it's just magical. This one I wanted to add just a tiny bit more of the blue. And we'll see what happens. There. So by doing that, I haven't predetermined where I want my shadows or my shapes to be, and so it's created a little design that I can run with. So this is where I say, very often with watercolors, when you have the right combination of materials, substrate, your paper, your pigment, and your brushes, they can work together, and as part of your team, really work on creating this with you. So let's just give a few more little tree shapes in here. As this dries, it will continue to move. I kind of think I need to join this area here slightly, so I'm just going to encourage that top bit of paint to join that area below. I think the hard thing for many of us is remembering to keep things more organic and random. I always tell people that it seems to be human nature to do the windshield wiper motion either this way or this way to make curves, so it's hard to sometimes to remember to not do that. Keep things more in line, more straight. And as this dries, it will become even more, more subtle. The colors will continue to blend. Now, because I've got this white spot here, I wasn't sure where that was going to end up. So I think what I want to do is just take my brush and basically, kind of a thirsty brush. I want it to be fairly dry, just a bit dampish. The colors on the page, the pigments, are still a bit damp. And if I just very gently work through, picking up with the tip of my brush a little bit of that pigment. I can even go over here and pick up a bit that's sitting loose on the page. And just gently try to introduce that. Now here is where I very often will, I don't want to dip my brush into the big bucket of water, pail of water. Sometimes all I need is just a droplet. So if I spray on my surface and just touch one of those drops, that's sometimes all I need. Just to get things wet enough to move that paint that's on the surface. So I'm introducing the colors from the side very gently in. I just want to soften that so that white spot isn't just so glaring. Again, I'm trying to keep my lines as horizontal as possible to avoid making patterns. If I want a pattern later, I can always adjust that, of course. And I don't want to get rid of all of the white. The white is beautiful on the page, so just by touching in some of the wet wetness that's already on the page and scuffling that around a little bit. It's given, I don't know, just another softness without destroying that whiteness. These on this side, I think what I want to see is, because these trees are further in the back, I don't necessarily want to see the vignette part, the part that come down as low as here, but I do want them to come down a tiny bit further. I could tip the page, but then I run the risk of having it run right off the bottom of the page. So I'm going to just take a damp brush and touch into that wet. I can see it's still quite wet, and bring it down. There are still some droplets on the page here. So if I encourage that pigment to follow the droplets, they're doing what they're meant to do, right? That's how watercolor works. The pigment and the water flow together, and the pigment will go wherever there is water. And if there's not water nearby, then we just encourage it to connect with those bits of water. So I think I'm happy with just having those come down that far there. And again, these have a lot of pigment in them. If I tip it back just for a moment, we get them back up into this this rocky area. And one more, I think, just one more dab with the plastic wrap. If I was to use the paper towel, the damp paper towel, like I do with my clouds, I probably would take too much of that pigment off. This way I just want to create a few highlights in there. And we'll try one more here. Like I say, if I was to leave it longer until it dried, then more of those areas would definitely appear more fractured, I guess, is the look that we get with that. So if I tip the page slightly, I can see I've got still lots of wet pigment on the page. Again, just using the corner of the paper towel to wick some of that up, so that if I do tip it up again, I'm not going to get major runs. And Roger brought me some little tabs to use, and so let's try one of those just to enhance a little bit of the area where this plastic wrap gave us some ideas here. So we'll just pull things to the side a tiny bit. I don't want to destroy this. I love that the colors there are blended together, so not to make those into rocks so much. Pardon me. And again, just on this side a slight bit. And there we have it. With one. Now, as I sit back and look, I've been so focused on my trees, I can see here where this area is, again, pretty sparse and bare looking. I'm going to just use the side of my damp brush to pull out those colors. And I'm not trying to fill in the whole area with color. I just want to pull that color out a tiny bit unevenly, I think is probably the best. And if we push out a bit of color here and there, sort of allows things to soften and again become a bit more organic. And see, I've gone right off the page. So if we mat it there, that's going to be just fine. So this one will go to Roger for a custom cut mat. I can see that now. Okay. And I might take a photo of this and and work on it a little longer. Always, once it's dry, things have, continue to evolve and until that happens, and things do change. So I will take a photo, go make a cup of tea, take a look at it a little bit later, and then I will see quite clearly where I want to make any more additions. And those additions will not be likely adding more trees. They will be going in with a little bright brush just to determine some lighter spots where I want to delineate some more cleaner edges, perhaps. But that would be that. That is my vignette. I'm happy with that little guy. I think it's my colors. I do love those colors, and yeah, I'm glad I got to play with that today. I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. I loved painting this little vignette. It's been a while since I've done one, so I'm glad you were here with me today to play along. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel or head on over to the members area.